Hi again then guys, and welcome to another look back to the relatively recent past still of the Gran Turismo franchise to GT6, once again to feature yet another car from the, I would call, Dirtmasters lineup, of course, in our review series of rally cars featured in the game. And initially, way back at the start of the series, I intended it to cover only the real rally cars, none of the concepts or the fictional versions. But then I ultimately thought, well, what's the point in that? You might as well just review them all because you can use them against each other, so why not? So that brings us to vehicles more along the lines of stuff like the Mitsubishi Evo 10 rally car, which of course technically isn't real, but it's still a very competitive machine. This one is a little bit different because it's more grounded, of course, in reality, being the prototype version of what would become the Subaru Impreza WRC machine. Now, the crucial question is, of course, how does this one compare not just to other rally cars in general, but to other Subarus, and more specifically than anything else, to the actual competition version of this same generation of WRX Impreza? Well, in some ways it's better. In some ways it's actually the same, and in some ways not as good. Now, in terms of how it's similar, or even the same, to the actual competition version, the performance points are actually exactly the same when you fully tune them up. It's 567. But the way in which it's actually not as good is power. So very interesting that it's a less powerful car but still has the same PP level when you fully upgrade it, and that is 531. Now, as far as torque, you're looking at a very healthy 582 pound-feet, and the way in which it's actually better than the competition version that would come later on is the weight. And that's a pretty good advantage to have, and of course the fact that it is less powerful is more than offset by the advantage in terms of weight, and it makes it so that that PP level being the same isn't really surprising once you level out those two different things. Because the weight on this particular one is 1,225 kilos. Now, the horsepower per tonne is 433, which again, for this kind of WRC machine, is very good. The pricing is 300,000 credits, which is very good, because if you're looking to buy one of the, for instance, newer WRC cars, which are all very good, the Focus, the Suzuki, etc., the newer Subaru even, they are way more expensive than this. In fact, you can almost buy 3 of these for the price of one of those cars. And although you could argue it's not maybe quite as sharp as the newer Impreza rally car, perhaps for some people, it's certainly not as compact as that car through corners. But I would say that these older WRC cars are, if anything, just as good in GT6 as they were back in the day over a decade earlier. So definitely you should check out one of the older Imprezas, if not one of the older rally cars in general. Even something like the Hyundai Accent, for instance, which is one of my personal favourites. It can still compete with much newer cars. Now, in terms of how this one actually performs, it's not necessarily worlds apart from the competition version, which isn't too surprising. It is the prototype, of course, at the end of the day. Most of the prototype versions of cars that we have in GT6 do tend to be very similar. The Black Mask version of the Skyline, or the GTR I should say, is very similar to the production car. The prototype version is fairly similar as well. The Black Mask Corvette is very similar. So, of course, they're going to be shades of what would become the road car, and you wouldn't expect it to be too different, because otherwise what was the point of the prototype at the end of the day? So this one, surprise to no one, is very similar to both the cars that preceded it and the ones that come after, but especially in particular, of course, the sedan based Impreza WRC cars rather than the newer hatchback. And basically what that means in practice is it's brilliant. You know, Impreza rally cars are dominant and iconic for a reason. The same reason as the Evo. They are great all-rounders. Because there are some cars which are very heavily modified to turn them into brilliant rally cars, like my personal favourite rally car of all time, the Skoda Fabia. It's good as a road car, but it's no way near the level of the rally car. Or the Hyundai Accent, my second favourite rally car. Great as a rally car, the road car, nothing to write home about. The difference with the Impreza and the Evo is that DNA is so closely, integrally linked to their street cars that they really do feel not as good, but definitely similar to the rally cars even on the street in terms of performance. So my overall thoughts as far as this particular Impreza goes, coming from someone who's not a super fan of the Impreza, I respect them a lot, but I've always been more of an Evo guy really. But that being said, it's a very dependable car. The price tag of 300 grand is a huge advantage over the newer machines, and if you're on a budget, that can make all the difference. But it's not just cheaper because it's worse, it's cheaper and it can still beat them under the right hands with the right driver. It's got a great spec across the board, the weight, the power, the torque, and the PP level isn't ridiculously high either. And overall, I would say that the thing about the Evo and the Impreza pretty much equally in terms of their WRC spec versions and variants is that they are to the rally world what the Skyline and now the GTR is for the road racing and street racing world. And that is something which won't beat absolutely everything all the time, but it will beat most of its opponents most of the time. It's a dependable, great value, reliable car which has a strong track record, is still an enduring legend, and for good reason. And really, to seal the deal on this one for me, it's not just that the price is great and that the performance is good and that it's a good all-rounder, but the fact that it is the prototype, it just makes it feel that much more special, almost, like kind of a unicorn compared to the others. The visuals are just slightly different, that unfinished look in some ways, the more simplified concept version kind of appearance that it has. It's only these small subtle details, but in a similar way to the Black Mask GTR, the Proto GTR, the Black Mask Corvette, it tends to be one of those cars which it just attracts players to it because it's different. It gives you everything great about the actual production or competition versions, but with that slight edge of more rarity and more exclusivity to it. And so overall, as a result of that, combined with all the rest of its great spec, yeah, I'd say this one's a pretty great car to go for. So if you absolutely have to have the newest one, then sure, go for the newer Impreza. It's a perfectly capable machine. But this one, for the price, for the value, for the obscurity, for the rarity added in there as well, it's a strong all-rounder. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.